Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope everybody is safe and healthy, and I just appreciate you taking your time out of your morning to join us today to talk about esports. Um, I want to, before we get going on kind of the whole broad topic, this is kind of like a crash course in esports, just kind of making sense of the interconnectedness in the web of all of the different pieces to the puzzle, if you will. But before we get started, I do want to give one huge shout out to Tierney Brothers. They are an incredible partner and just somebody that we've been really thankful to work with over the last, 6 months, getting this big platform off the ground. I wonder if we can do here actually. So thanks again to Tierney Brothers for driving the membership traffic to the webinar this morning and for being such a great partner for esports. We really appreciate everything that they're doing to help spread the good word and kind of help schools start this new sport and kind of undertake this big endeavor. So we're really thankful for their partnership, and we just want to give them a shout out this morning. A little bit about myself. My name's Josh Knutson. Nice to meet everybody. I'm the Esports and Virtual Reality Solutions Director here at ByteSpeed. I am a NACAD advisory board member, so that's the National Association of Esports Coaches and Directors. I've been an advisory board member for that group since it was formed back in the summer of last year. So just over a year coming up. It's the kind of the National Coaches Association, really driven at providing professional development for new esports coaches and just passing along resources, much like we're doing here this morning. Just talking about esports, kind of giving out the information to those that need it, and then helping the existing programs keep moving forward. I'm also a former head coach and program director. I got my start in esports at the University of Jamestown in North Dakota. It's my alma mater, and we started the esports program back in 2016. I started and ran that program until May of last year. My 1 year anniversary at ByteSpeed is actually a week from today, so that's kind of exciting. But that's kind of where I got my start in esports, was coaching at UJ, and where a lot of what we'll talk about is the background experience and the different things that I learned as a coach and a program director and actually building out a program. My contact information is here on the screen. Please feel free to note down those phone numbers. Give me a call, shoot me an email, connect with me on social media. Ask me questions, even if it's something little that you might not know the answer to. Feel free to reach out. I love talking about esports. And today is a big forum, but I'd love to have those individual conversations with you as well if you need something. So what are we here to talk about today? Esports. It's this big giant web of different things that are connected, but it all starts with the teams and the clubs. Esports at its core, when you talk about where things kind of fit in and what it is from a core standpoint, we need to start with the teams and the clubs, the actual people who are participating, because without them, we don't have a sport. We don't have a platform to stand on when it comes to driving student engagement and the like. So we're going to talk about the differences between clubs and teams and kind of their similarities as well, and then kind of take a look at the larger web of how everything fits together. So the leagues, conferences, platforms, streaming, all of it kind of from a very top-down level, very basic introductory crash course, and hopefully will give you an idea, like a 101 type class on kind of esports as an ecosystem and as a whole. So let's talk about program structure, because like I said, that's where we need to start. We'll start with varsity level teams, because that's kind of where my strong background comes from. At the University of Jamestown, we created a varsity level team. We decided that through a couple of different initiatives on our campus, we wanted to drive enrollment, wanted to drive student engagement, and for a liberal arts college of 1,000 undergrad students, adding another varsity roster of 30 students was a big deal. So that's kind of the direction that we went. And some of the key features of varsity teams, they often have a program director. So that was me. Somebody kind of who functions like a mini athletic director almost, oversees the whole program, helps with recruiting and scheduling and structuring about how you're going to actually move forward as a team. And also, at my situation, and I think a lot of the high schools out there and still a lot of the colleges, that program director is part of the coaching staff, if not the only coach. So, myself, I had the benefit of working alongside my CIO at the university. He was kind of our technology director. But all of the coaching, the day-to-day, the running of the team and making sure that we were competing and operating and the students were on top of their grades and all of those things were kind of blended into a head coach program director type role. And that was just myself. At some of the larger schools out there, they're lucky enough to have multiple people on their coaching staff through volunteers, assistant coaches, whether they're paid or not. Usually it's a head coach per game is kind of a model that we've seen pretty similarly throughout those big programs, but often it's a division of labor that is sometimes skewed towards one person, especially when teams are starting, and that's okay. But as esports grows and expands, we start to see coaching staffs get bigger and bigger. Varsity programs often have larger budgets, just through the different university support that they get, or the school support, whether it be booster club funded or something like that. It's often, more money to play with. Esports, there's this big kind of idea that, it's really expensive to get an esports team off the ground. And it is in one way. You do need equipment, which, there is a cost to that, but your operating budget from year to year is much, much smaller than a traditional sport. There's not the travel because you can play online from your home site. So we're not paying for buses. We're not paying for, meals for our students because they're, eating in our dining centers or being able to go home right away. After school. So there's not a lot of those costs associated from year to year to year, but there is a little bit of an upfront cost in getting, the equipment and everything set up. Varsity teams often have dedicated facilities, spaces that are given just to that program, whether it be a retrofitted computer lab or, a classroom space that was taken over, something along those lines, to where, it is a dedicated space for them to play, and it is kind of like their home. Scholarships, when we're talking at the college level, varsity teams often have more opportunities for scholarships. Clubs are typically more on the student organization side and might not have the allocation of budget for scholarships, but that's a kind of a key hallmark of what makes a varsity program at the college level. Mostly external competition, and what I mean by that is varsity teams typically compete against other schools, whether it be in their own league or in something like online tournaments or going to a LAN. They're doing things outside of just playing against other members of their school. And oftentimes those varsity teams have more school support in different ways, financial, staffing, what have you. Club teams, on the other side of the coin, often have staff advisors. So this would be a coach or a teacher or somebody at the school who is tapped to kind of oversee the students, oversee kind of the formation, but oftentimes it's student run as far as the day-to-day business goes. You have great student leaders that come through and, are the president or the vice president or what, those typical roles that you see in other traditional student organizations at both high school and college level. They have smaller budgets that are mostly fundraised. So a lot of the times, you're doing, bake sales or, selling raffle tickets or doing 50-50 at a football game or something like that. Any number of different fundraisers to help with your budget. And a lot of the times the club teams are very reliant on that fundraising, as opposed to sometimes having varsity teams that just get a pool of budget money allocated to them. The great thing about clubs is that they have internal and external competition. So at the university level, that would be like your intramural sports, kind of online tournaments that you have against other students in the school. That could be like an after school tournament on, like, hey, Wednesday after school, we're getting together to have a Smash tournament. Or, this weekend, the intramural championships are happening for Overwatch or something like that. And they also have the benefit of joining the external club leagues out there. So there's a lot of opportunity to still compete inside the school and outside of it. You also have oftentimes a larger group of students with the pure club teams. A lot more opportunity to get involved with, A teams, B teams, C teams, D teams, the list goes on and on and on. Think about how many students are you limited to on like a varsity high school basketball roster? How many students are you limited to on your JV? With esports, especially at the club level, you don't have those big giant restrictions of saying, well, I can only have like 15 students a part of this team before I have to knock them down a level. You can have multiple teams competing at the same time at roughly the same level, and it gives you a lot more flexibility to have a lot more students involved. And kind of also piggybacking off of that, there's a lot more titles that are participated in because at the varsity level, they might be, your school or team might be only focusing on a few titles. And when I say title, that just means game. We might make the decision like we did at Jamestown. Our first year, we decided that we were going to go all in on Overwatch, League of Legends, and Hearthstone. And those were the only 3 games that we were going to play. That's what we recruited for. And that was kind of what we decided was going to be our main focus. But that meant I didn't have Rocket League players. I didn't have Rainbow Six players or some of those other games that have really good existing esports clusters of students, but it wasn't titles that we were participating in, so we didn't have those students a part of our program. On the club side, you can add titles as long as your school is okay with it. So, you're not limited to, okay, well, we have a varsity season for Overwatch, which means I can only have X amount of players, and they all have to play just Overwatch. I can have students that are interested in titles that might not have a big varsity season that's statewide or nationwide, but you can have more people participating and playing, which is really, really cool. And I think more than anything, we're seeing a blended model between the two really becoming the norm here. So I'm going to use University of Akron as an example. They're one of ByteSpeed and Gravity Gaming's biggest relationships at the collegiate level. They have 2,200 students a part of their esports program. It is a massive amount of students. Now, University of Akron has something like 17,000 students. So it's not, and actually it might be more than that. So there's a very large population of students at UA, and they have 2,200 students that are part of their esports program. only 100 of those, actually less than that, it's closer to 75, are a part of their varsity program. And the rest are all club participants. So, the breakdown, the varsity team competes in all of the major leagues around the collegiate ecosystem. So you're talking about like your Collegiate League of Legends, TESPA, which runs the University Overwatch tournaments, Akron run back-to-back Rocket League national championships. So, they were competing at that very high varsity level. The picture that you see here is their separate varsity training facility. It's its own space, separate from the rest of their computers in their facility. It's actually in a different building than the rest of their facility. And the rest of those students participate in their club system, which, like I said, is a lot of intramurals and club leagues and stuff like that. So they have 3 staff members. One of those persons was full-time, totally dedicated to making sure that the club system was operational, giving those 2,100 students that weren't varsity a lot of opportunities throughout the year to compete, to be a part of that program, get all of the social and emotional benefits of being a part of a team in that system. And I think the blended model is becoming more of a norm, especially as teams get bigger. At the university level, for sure. High schools have already been doing this for a really long time. And it's the best way to get as many students involved as possible and kind of get the best experience overall. So let's talk about leagues, because we have to have a place to play. And this is a big question that we get asked. We have a team, but who do we play against? Who's the governing body, or any of those types of questions. It's kind of 2 split. So you have developer-run leagues, and this is mainly at the college level. So you have things like the Riot Scholastic Association of America. TESPA, like I said, runs the National Overwatch Tournament every year. Hi-Rez was doing things with Smite and Paladins in conjunction with NACE, and that's a good tie-in kind of with the third-party leagues out there. And this is like your National Association of Collegiate Esports, the National Junior College Athletic Association with esports, Collegiate Star League, Play Versus, High School Esports League, NACEF, a lot of the state organizations, so like Esports Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, those states that have really taken a grassroots approach to organizing state tournaments and kind of the regular seasons that we all compete in. The big difference and kind of why we have this split is this thing called intellectual property. Nobody owns football, right? We don't have that problem of where, I can go and say, we're going to go play football and nobody's going to care. But Riot owns League of Legends. They are the developer of the game. They own the intellectual property rights to the game, and they want to control the environment because they want to control the marketing and the messaging surrounding that product, which kind of gets in the way in some ways of starting up a league here or starting up a league there. A lot of the times you have to go and ask permission to run community tournaments or things like that. So you don't have to call the NFL when you want to run a flag football tournament or have the state of Missouri play football at the high school level, right? But in order to play esports in some games, you have to contact the developer and get their blessing. And that's kind of a big sticking point. But to kind of go through along with that, for the games out there when they're operating throughout the year in these leagues, they're all kind of on their own schedule. And this is something that has been a big frustration in esports for as long as I've been a part of the scene, and even before that. Every game operates totally separate from every other game. You might have a shared developer like TESPA that runs Hearthstone and Overwatch, 2 of their products. They run them in similar fashions, but it might be totally different time frames throughout the year, totally different days, totally different rules about how matches are played, because every game is unique and different. So for colleges, you might have the Collegiate League of Legends season that starts in January and goes through April. But you might have TESPA that runs different games in a totally different semester, but they might just say, hey, we're going to run year round. And at high school, it could be mixed and matched. You could have League of Legends and Rocket League in the fall. Winter invitationals could happen over Christmas break with whatever game your league wants to run. Spring might be Smite, Smash, Overwatch. You might have a summer open or something. So really, when you're looking at esports, there's an opportunity to compete year round. It's kind of unique in that fact that it's not just limited to 12 weeks during this semester. It really has the flexibility of being something that you compete in, as long as your students are in school, which is a good thing. And it's also something to be cautious about when you're trying to plan out your year and thinking about, okay, what games are we going to get involved with? What opportunities for our students do we have? What's our coaches' availability? Those are things that you'll need to take in consideration. But the fact that you can compete year round is really, really awesome, because again, that gets back to engaging your students, making sure that there's a lot of opportunities for them to get involved and be a part of something. And that way, your football players who were super busy in the fall, they might not be able to do esports in October and November, but maybe they can join in the spring semester and play a different game. So there's a lot of great flexibility there. But the long story short is that the leagues and seasons are frustratingly separate, but there are some great things happening with conferences and different organizers to kind of try and bring everything under one roof. So that brings us next to conferences. This is a lot more university focused, so I'm not going to go super in depth, but for a long time, conferences were regionally or geographically based. So, you have your north, south, east, and west. And this is true for some high school leagues out there too. Your big nationwide organizers like the High School Esports League, they have more regional based conferences or groups that you would be a part of. They're very much so just split up based on where you're located. Now, and kind of the great trend that we're starting to see is that partnered organizations and conferences are starting to show up. And these can be existing athletic conferences. So, again, for collegiate, you have the Peach Belt Conference, the Mountain West, the ECAC, groups that have been doing traditional sports for a really long time. Now jumping into esports and adopting that traditional sports model of trying to run esports, across the board, which is great for a number of reasons that we'll talk about in a second here. And then you also have, conferences that are popping up for esports only. Midwest Esports Conference right here in Minnesota. The Esports Collegiate Conference, it's kind of somewhat nationwide, different places that are just for esports and are kind of taking in the schools that might not have an existing home in something like the Peach Belt. These conferences are great because we get a lot of different benefits to them. The seasons can be scheduled out a lot farther in advance. Typically esports, because it's online and because there's so many participant schools that are playing against each other and so many skill levels across the board, it's hard to get a season that's fair without doing Swiss style brackets. And what Swiss style means is that you're always playing a team with the same record as you throughout the regular season. The downside of that is every week after you have a match, you're going to get reseeded and rescheduled. If I win a game on week 1, now I'm going to play another 1-0 team. Well, that's only half the teams out there. And the other half that lost in week 1, they're going to go and play amongst themselves and so on and so forth. If you have a conference that's built out beforehand, say I have 10 schools in, the Minnesota Esports Conference, for example, we can go through and say, okay, well, we know we're going to play all 9 of these other schools in the conference. We can start to actually schedule out regular seasons a lot easier than, taking a large swath of, 80 schools in the north. It kind of narrows the playing field down. You can get some of those imbalanced games, having a really highly skilled team going up against a team that might be a little newer to the game or might be a little underskilled. So there is that downside of things, but being able to schedule farther in advance is something that I think is a great benefit. You can start to build rivalries. So, I went to Milner Public School, and 10 miles down the road was North Sargent, and we were super big rivals in every sport out there in high school. But for esports, you might not, even though we're 10 miles apart, because we're online and because we might be playing in this large geographic region, there's no guarantee that we would play each other. And then you're missing out on a lot of those great storylines and the potential for really great rivalry games, between Milner and North Sargent to play each other. So having a conference schedule and being able to say, yes, we're going to play North Sargent on May 3rd, 2020, we can prepare for that. We can build hype for that. And we can, spread the word and have more people watch. The in-person events, having conference championships that are held in person, playoff games, championships, things like that. It's really hard to say, hey, a team from Bemidji, Minnesota, you're going to fly all the way down to Missouri because that's the bottom of your conference, and you're going to play an in-person championship. That doesn't always work at the college level, and it almost never works at the high school level. It's just too far, and it costs too much money to travel that far. But when you have teams that are kind of more centrally located, in upper Minnesota or in, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, or something like that, the travel distances and the commitment to going to an in-person event becomes a lot more manageable. More games in a season. One of the big downfalls of the Collegiate League of Legends season is for those big geographic conferences. It's a 6-week season, and you get 6 games, and if you lose 2, you're out. You don't qualify for playoffs if you went 4-2 in that regular season. The flip side of that, the Midwest Esports Conference, one of those new esports only conferences, had a 12-game season. So they effectively doubled the amount of games that they were playing. And it makes those early season losses a little bit more bearable. It makes just having more opportunity to compete, again, more opportunity to get your students engaged and doing things alongside the program instead of just like, hey, your season's 6 weeks and then we're done. That feels pretty bad, when you've worked all semester to get ready for the season and then we're all of a sudden done in a month and a half. It prolongs the payoff of being able to, interact with your teammates and all of those great things. And then playoffs, more teams make playoffs because more conferences exist that can send teams along. So platforms. This is kind of like a really broad kind of catch-all that I wanted to throw in here, but it can mean a lot of things. When you think of a platform, well, what is that? When we talk about platforms, especially in esports, we're talking about things like gameplay. What system are you playing on? The majority of esports titles are PC based, but there are some out there for, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch. Super Smash Brothers is a huge game in the esports community that is just on Nintendo Switch. So there's differences and similarities between, where you can play. There's cross-platform out there to where Overwatch can be played on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, and actually Switch. But a lot of the times, like your League of Legends, those types of games are designed for computer, and that's where the majority of the highest level competition is played. So that's, your gameplay platform, your tournament platform. What are we actually logging on to access our games? Things like BattleFi, Tespa, LeagueSpot, all of these different online platforms that you can log into that give you your season information. This would be like the Play Versus portal or the High School Esports League website. Things like that kind of give you information on who you're playing, what the rules are, stuff like that. Then we have social media, huge part of esports at all levels of play. Social media is how we connect with each other. It's how we share what each team is up to. A lot of the high school and colleges teams out there have, Facebook or Twitter accounts. They're sharing things on Instagram and eFuse. Discord is a huge tool for esports. Not only is it your in-game communication tool that you can use to talk to each other, talk strategy, communicate during the game, but it's also a place where you can have community message boards and announcements and other things that are super relevant to your team be posted in that Discord and be able to interact with people even outside of the team. You can insert your streaming service here. We'll talk about streaming here in a bigger section, but that is a social media that a lot of teams are grabbing onto because that's how we share our gameplay. And then I have TikTok in here because it's relevant, and there are actually some teams that are creating TikTok accounts and sharing content that way. Then you have stats platforms, op.gg, something that every League of Legends team should be looking at. That's your online stats portal to where you can get information on not only how you're doing, but how other schools are doing, and you can scout and look up strategies and things like that. GYO, very similar, as are the other two platforms on here. So a lot of great content and information's out there in these online platforms. And finally, streaming. Twitch, YouTube, Mixer, Facebook. Those are kind of like your most well-known platforms. Twitch being right now the most popular and the largest as far as the streaming goes. As far as overall content, that probably goes to YouTube. Mixer and Facebook growing every day. And there are high school and college teams that stream to just one of these, to all four of these. It's really up to the school and deciding what they want to do as far as streaming goes. But it's a huge part of running an esports program because, that's how we interact with people. That's how we actually view content. For football, I can look and say, okay, Fargo North High School is going to play Fargo South at 7 o'clock on Friday night. I can go to that football field. I can pay admission. I can watch that team play. We don't really have that for esports because it's online and we're playing from our own schools. So where do we actually go to watch our teams play? Well, you look at their streaming. You look at their Twitch page, their YouTube channel. We watch their content online, and streaming allows us to push that content out and interact with people. So some of the most common streaming software out there: OBS, Streamlabs, XSplit, they're all free, they're all great. From my experience, Streamlabs is the best at integrating with Twitch really easily. They've got a lot of great tutorials and easy plug and play aspects to really make an entry level stream look really, really good. And you can also take that to the 100th degree and be able to really create a professional looking broadcast. And that production can look varied. You can have the spectator camera just from the in-game client doing all the work for you, very simple. And you can have, these big productions with multiple cameras and on-air talent and all those things like that. This is a great way to engage even more students than just the ones that want to play esports. You're going to have the students that are really excited to go and play Overwatch for their school, or play League of Legends after school with their friends. But then one of the great things about esports is there are going to be students who have an interest in broadcast or an interest in social media or an interest in marketing, all these different content areas that want to get involved. And this is a great way to engage more of those students. You know, there are universities out there that are signing players to scholarships for streaming, for broadcasting help. You know, just an example of one of those big universities, Boise State University in Idaho, has, I think, the best production facility in the country when it comes to esports. They have a full, almost like a TV station crew working, and these are all students, you know, working with the switchers. You know, they have this giant computer in the corner that's running everything, and they have multiple camera angles, a sound engineer, an audio, visual, you know, director that's kind of, you know, making sure that the broadcast goes really smoothly. So you have the technical people for streaming, but you also have the on-camera talent, your casters, your you know, your ESPN analyst type students. This is a great way for them to get involved with esports as well, even if they're not interested in playing. So, you know, they could be on camera commentating the game, you know, giving play-by-play analysis, doing things like that. And the important thing with streaming is just dip your toe in and just try and get content out there. Like I said, this is how we watch, support, and learn. You know, this is how, you know, the parents of your students can, you know, follow the program. They can watch their son or daughter play, you know, on Thursday night when your school is playing, you know, their weekly match. It's a huge part of running an esports program, and it's oftentimes, you know, like the last piece of the puzzle that falls in. You know, you want to have your program in place. You want to have the rules associated with how you're going to run the team. You want to know which games you're competing in. You want to know who you're competing against, what league you're going to join. And after you kind of have all of those pieces in, now it's time to push out content and decide, okay, you know, we have everything else. Now we're actually going to compete. How do we share that? How do we, you know, let our fans, our friends, our community know what we're doing? So at this point, I know we kind of blazed through a bunch. We're going to open it up for questions. I have the chat here. Let's see. How do we find out which titles are available? That's a great question. And it really comes down to which league you're a part of. And everybody that's still in here, please feel free to type out your questions in chat. We'll go for another 10 minutes or so. So titles. A lot of the times, like I said, it's the league that you're a part of. So if I'm playing, you know, let's say I'm a high school and I'm located in Ohio. I'm gonna talk to Esports Ohio, which is kind of that teacher-led, volunteer, statewide esports organization, and I'm gonna find out what titles they're competing in a given semester. So, you know, this last fall, they had a regular season for Overwatch, League of Legends, Super Smash Bros, and Rocket League. So those were the 4 titles that the teams that were a part of Esports Ohio were playing in and competing in. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't add, you know, a Smite team or a Paladins team or a Rainbow Six team. I just might not be able to find competition that's, you know, already being played in my area. I might have to go to another organization like Play Versus or High School Esports League or something like that. The long and short of it is that as a school, you can add whatever title you want as long as it's content appropriate for your students. So a great way to kind of have a guideline there is every game has its own rating by the ESRB. So, you know, T for teen, M for mature, whatever it might be, E for everyone. That's a great guideline to be able to say, okay, you know, we're a middle school, maybe we're not going to play Counter-Strike or one of the more mature shooter games. Maybe we're going to stick to League of Legends or Rocket League or something that's a lot more content appropriate. But for universities, it might be, what national tournaments can we join in because we want to win national championships. It might be, what are the other schools in my area playing? So you're going to have to do a little bit of digging, but kind of at the end of the day, it's up to you. And you can really just kind of take a look at what other schools are playing, what the leagues around you are doing, and make your decision there. Andrew Wright raised a hand. Let's see. You've got a chance to talk now, Andrew.
So, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. Unintentional.
Oh, you're good. Okay. Any other questions out there? We might have another one here. Okay, we answered that. Done. Any other questions from anybody? I know we covered a lot. There'll be a recording sent out afterwards with a survey in case you missed something or you want to go back and kind of rewatch or listen again. That's totally cool. Again, you can always reach out. Let me go back to my contact information. We'll just get that on the screen here for you guys in case you need it. And really, I just want to thank everybody for taking their time out this morning to joining us for, a little over half an hour, 45 minutes here, talking about esports. I know it's a lot, but it's a really important and relevant thing. New question that came in. How about monies needed to implement at the high school level? Awesome question. Thank you. Okay, funding for esports is, I touched on it a little bit. It is scary up front, but your year-to-year cost is going to be significantly lower than some of the other sports out there. One of the cool things about esports is that, and we'll talk about recommendations for equipment too. Yep. So one of the cool things about esports is that we're playing on computers that can be used for other things in our school, especially at the high school level. This is a great way to look at things. So there's a ton of grants out there. So if you go to ByteSpeed.com, there is under our resources tab, there's a big list of grant opportunities out there for STEM or other education type funding that you can use to buy equipment for things like, a new Photoshop lab or a makerspace or VR or AutoCAD or any of those really curriculum-based projects that at the end of the day, hey, we're using these high-end machines for classes during the day at, 3 o'clock or 3:30 or whenever your end of day is, all of a sudden we've got the hardware that we need to run esports titles really, really well. So that's a great way to look for funding. The price range of systems on the entry-level side is going to be, around $1,000, a little bit more. At the high end, I mean, you can go overboard and spend, $2,000 on a computer. But at the end of the day, kind of your sweet spot for high school is going to be, between $1,000 and $1,500, maybe a little bit more, depending on the specs that you're going to get. But you don't have to go overboard. And a great way to find out what pricing would be and kind of, get in touch with your Tierney rep. They're great resources. They have a huge kit of, different builds that we can send over, different things that ByteSpeed has created on the esports side of things. In partnership with Tierney, the different builds with specs and recommendations for furniture and peripherals like mouse and keyboard, things like that. So get in touch with your Tierney reps, or you can reach out to myself and we'll get you connected. And really, for other types of funding, I always go back to, there's a high school that we work with in Illinois. It's Sandoval High School, and Marvin Lindsay is I think he's a computer science teacher there. And they've done a lot of great fundraising over the last couple of years to support their high school team. You know, Marvin has done things like they had like a school store where they sold, you know, snacks in the afternoon. They built one of his computer classes, they built an arcade cabinet with like a just a low-end computer in there. I think it might have even been like a Raspberry Pi or something like that. And they built an arcade cabinet, and they're selling raffle tickets as a fundraiser for their esports team. They've done car washes and other things like that. Your booster club is a great place to reach out to. Local businesses, if you have, you know, a local IT shop or, you know, any businesses in the community that have a good tie to your school, maybe they're boosters for other sports. This is another great way for them to make an impact to more kids in the community. So that might be a good place to reach out to for sponsorship or help funding or, you know, small donations. And that's kind of just like where I would start. And there's tons and tons of funding out there. The CARES Act recently opened up a lot of technology funding nationwide. It's on a state-by-state basis as to who's actually, you know, applying and able to get that money. But, you know, we've heard from schools in Montana that it's really helping to free up their budget, and that's relief money for the COVID crisis that's happening right now. So there's stuff out there right now, actually, that'll be able to help you, you know, get funding for esports in different creative ways other than just saying, hey, I need money for a high-end gaming computer. And as far as recommendations for equipment, really, you don't want to go below like an i5 if you can help it. That's kind of like our baseline entry-level config is like an i5 with 16 gigs of RAM and a good graphics card, starting at like the 1660 Super range. It's an entry-level card that doesn't cost a ton, but it performs really, really well. And really those kind of components, your processor, your RAM, your video card, those are really some of the big key components. Also, I would recommend like an SSD to run your games. It's just going to perform a little bit better than a spin drive. And like I said, you can reach out to Tierney, your reps there. You can reach out to myself, and we can get you kind of like a brochure that kind of lists out all the different configs, the upgrade options, etc. So with that, I think we're going to end things here. Again, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure having you this morning. Join us for the Esports 101 webinar. We really appreciate it. And, you know, like I said, please reach out if you have questions. We'd love to talk to you, both myself and, you know, Tierney and ByteSpeed. You know, we want to see esports grow as a community, as a sport. And having more schools join in and be a part of this only helps that. And we're here to help you in any way we can. So thank you again. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll hopefully talk soon.